Good afternoon. My name is Alicia Gutchow, and together we're going to unlock the power of data and identity management. In this presentation and demo, we're going to talk about where we can find data, how we can access it, both through the interface and the API, and we're going to go through several different use cases of how we can take advantage of the data that we have available to either make our processes more efficient or improve our overall identity management process. And finally, we'll conclude with some tips and tricks. So as we've moved forward in identity management, our data has continued to expand, but it hasn't been well governed, maintained, normalized. And especially in new implementations, this can be very messy. We want our new implementation efforts to be very efficient and cost effective, but we want to also ensure that users and systems are not negatively impacted. So business leaders are increasingly concerned with the quality of our data. In addition, they want to make sure that they can show return on investment for this significant expenditure that they have made. So how can we get data from our identity management platform and use our data analysis tools to make better decisions and improve the value proposition of our identity platform? So just a little bit of level setting. You'll see in the slides that I kind of have two objectives. If you are a non-engineering IAM leader, you'll be able to see what's possible and be able to use this to take back to your team and show them what you might want to do. Whereas if you're a very technical resource, you'll see some tips of how I was able to accomplish some of the use cases that we're going to show here. There are a lot of slides. Don't try to read them all as we go through. They're meant for you to have as a reference. There's lots of links for when the presentation is over. All right, so what tools should we use outside of Identity Security Cloud? For this demo, we've selected the Microsoft stack, as most companies already have some expertise in-house with these products. And even if there isn't expertise within your IAM team, chances are there's someone in your organization who can at least help you get started. However, if you have other favorite tools and techniques, we've used Python, Java, Tableau. The ideas will apply into those platforms. All right. So we're going to start with looking at the data in the interface and being able to see what's available just from the GUI. So in the top left corner, you'll see the search screen, and we can use the search screen to be able to perform basic queries on our users who exist in the system. We can see users that were created in the last 7 days, users without managers, users in a particular department. However, this data is limited just to users and identities. We do have some ability to export that data, as you see on the top right, for use in other tools. But again, we are somewhat limited just to identity data. Identity Security Cloud has some newer features in terms of the dashboards that you can see more statistics about your platform. And also in the role insights and access insights, you can see some additional levels of detail. But this may not be all of the data that you're looking for. So what can we do? Identity Security Cloud has a very rich API that can access all of the data that's in the interface and much more. If you haven't explored the API before, you can check out these links. There is full API documentation on developer.sailpoint.com, YouTubes from last year's developer days introducing the API, a quick learn series on the SailPoint University, and I've given you also some links to Postman and the SailPoint collections. If you go to the developer.sailpoint.com site, you can search all of the different areas of the API that are exposed. From each example, like here, I'm looking at perform search. You can see what the parameters are that are required. You can see examples in different languages, and you can see all of the different variations that you might want to try. You can also see what a particular request looks like. Now, you'll also find a lot of examples in the community forum. One thing you should pay attention to if you're trying to learn about the API is make sure when you're looking at the particular search or the particular API commands that you're looking in the V3 or the beta APIs. If you find old examples for CC or V2 APIs, these have been deprecated, and you should find the equivalent in the V3. In addition to the API that we're going to look at in just a minute, SailPoint has also released 3 software development kits to make this process easier. These are provided in Go, PowerShell, and TypeScript. It will be easier to interact with the tenant as the process will handle the token management as well as pagination, and we'll talk about those items. And I've given you some links here if you have not set that up before. There are very good directions on the developer.sailpoint.com to help you get that set up. All right, we want to switch over for just a minute, and I want to show you a little bit about the API. So I'm going to switch into Postman. This is how a lot of us got started looking at the APIs for SailPoint. And I have it pulled up here. I've already configured this for my tenant, and you'll see here in my URL that I am executing the search command, and the body of my search is I'm looking for identities, and I just want to return all identities. So if I click the send, you'll see here that I get back all of the users, and it will format it into pretty JSON format for me. And I have Ralph, and if I scroll a little farther, you'll see here's all of Ralph's access. And just to show you there's more than one user, I'll eventually get to Harry. We can modify our search parameters here to give us more specific users. So for example, I can search for my user, and you'll see the results have been customized to me. You'll notice that my results are much shorter than Ralph's because I don't have as much access in this platform. Now, one of the things about using Postman is you have to pay attention to pagination. So by default, Postman will only give us 250 records at a time. So if you had a very big data set that you wanted to query, you would have to be able to iterate around that and get 0 to 250, 251 to 499, and so on. But it does give you a way to explore and see what the various searches can do, and also explore the data. You'll find a lot of directions on especially on the SailPoint University. There's some specific references to how to set this up. But there may be a slightly easier way. And if we instead look in Visual Studio, VS Code, there's a couple of things that we can do. We can install the Identity Now extension, and this will give us visibility into a number of things about our tenant. We can see all of the various settings, all of the attribute names, all of the identifiers just by clicking. Now, one piece that's missing in the extension is you will not be able to get any identity information. But if you're looking for source information or your workflows or your rules, it's a really easy way to get access to it. But SailPoint has helped us out with the SDK. So I've installed the SDK in this environment, and there are some basic commands that they've already provided. So for example, my search here, if you look down at line 21, I can invoke a paginated search, and I can get up to 150,000 records from this particular search. Now, how is it going to know what to search? You saw in the JSON and the Postman that I had my name. Again, here you have a slightly different format, but the same types of fields and information. So if I execute this query, it will produce the same result. So if we look, we can see that I can get to the bottom and scroll. Here's all of my information in a format that SailPoint has delivered to display this on the screen. Now, if I were to take that back to my search, I want to get all of my users because I want to do some data analysis on them. And I search for everything. It's going to think a minute. And I have pages and pages and pages of results. Well, that's not going to be very easy for me to work through. So what I've done is I've used this invoke paginate search function, and I've put a little bit of a wrapper around it. And I want to show you a little bit about that. So I have the same basic setup. I have the invoke paginate search. And then what I'm going to do with those results is I'm going to save them into this variable $results. And for each item, this is an ordered hash table, for each item in the hash, I'm going to iterate through it, and I'm going to resolve the nested structure. Now, why do I need to resolve the nested structure? When you're looking at JSON format, you're only going to get attributes if they have values. So if you remember before, I mentioned that I don't have as much access as Ralph did in my tenant. So he's going to have a lot more values in his results than I do. So if we want to export this to, say, a CSV file because we want to do some data manipulation in something like Excel, we're going to have to be able to break it apart. So what I've done is I've written this function resolve nested structure. And I'll just show you a little bit about this. It's going to take the results that I got from my search command. And what it's going to do is for each row, each record that it finds in the ordered hash table, it is going to look into that record and see what data it's finding. If it finds another hash table, because can be multi-layered hash tables, it will just repeat this process of breaking it back apart. However, if it finds actual data, what it will do is it will save the value for the particular row into a working hash that only has the data for one user, so only Ralph's data. And it'll also make us a list of all of the attribute names that it found. Now, I could have included the specific attribute names in my search command, but I wanted to make this flexible so it doesn't really matter which source I'm querying. I can have all of the data returned no matter what tenant, what platform my identities are coming from, what my naming conventions are. So I'm going to also store the names of the keys. And I'm just going to keep iterating until I get all of Ralph's data into this working hash, and then I'm going to add that to an all entities hash. Once I'm done with that particular hash, what I'm going to do is it'll drop back to the bottom, and what it will do is it will take all of the keys, and it's going to print a header starting with ID name and display name, but then it's going to take each of the other keys and it's going to write that to the top line of our CSV that has all of our attribute names. And then once it's done that, it's going to go through and it's going to go through each identity's record and put a value in for each field. If they don't have that particular field, it will just leave it blank, but it will still be there. So I can have dissimilar data being saved into the same file. And once I get through all of the data and all the entries have been added, it will add that to a file for me. So in this case, if I run this, you'll see what's going to, at the very bottom of the screen, you'll notice that it's going to flash up. It says downloading. And what it has done, and it's written that out to a file. And I'm going to just show you the file. So don't try to read all of it, but I just want you to see that, yes, we did get all of our data into a CSV format. And you can see some of the records are much longer than other records. So we can do this type of activity with the search for identities. Now, what if we wanted something different that we want to access one of the other APIs for? So in the when you're downloading the SDK, there is a way to automate your install. There's also a way that you can download the full SDK by itself. And I've done that on my laptop. And the nice part about being able to, I did the automated, but I also downloaded it because then I can go through and I can look at the particular APIs that are available and I can learn more about the different things I can do. So for example, there is an API that's called Get Account, and I can use that API. Now, these functions here still have the pagination problem if I just use the Get Account. So what the SDK has provided to us is let me scroll really quickly for you, an invoke paginate function method that can take any of the other functions and iterate through the result set. So in this case, we can do get accounts, and we can go through and get all of the data for all of the accounts in the particular source that we've selected. Now, the process works basically the same way. I've modified it slightly to adjust for the different data that comes from accounts. You'll see here I don't have display name because that's not an attribute that's valid in this context. I also changed my CSV here to use a semicolon because I was doing Active Directory, and Active Directory has commas of its own. But you could do something very much like this based on your own data. And it will work the same way. It will get all of the data, and then it will store it into a file. So we're going to use this data as the basis of how we go through the use cases and see what we're able to accomplish with the data. Okay, so we're going to go back to the PowerPoint, and we're going to look at some basic data analysis questions. So one of the things that comes up in new Identity Security Cloud implementations, if the particular client has never had an HR-driven automation process before, their data may not be consistent, or it may not have the values that are needed to do the automation that's desired. So we want to look at that data and make sure that there are no anomalies, and that we get those, if there are anomalies, we get those corrected ahead of time. Another use case would be you're going to make some major data change. I've given you an example here if you want to change your email address structure. And your service desk manager is kind of nervous about this change, and he wants you to tell him how many people are going to be impacted, and maybe they're going to contact them and those kinds of things. Or maybe you have a specific audit requirement that you need to be able to produce a particular report that is not currently available in through search. So we're going to work through those examples. In this case, we're just going to use Excel. Again, I want to focus on easy tools that everybody has access to and might have some knowledge just to get started. So we're going to flip over to Excel, and I'm just going to show you a little bit about the identities that we exported. Get pulled up here and make it a little bigger so you can see it. So this is all of the data out of our CSV file that we've now pulled into Excel. I will tell you, I did catch with Excel a couple of times. It wanted to truncate some leading zeros, and we don't want it to do that because we want those IDs to be accurate. So just keep that in mind if you follow along. So you can see here I have Stephanie Coleman, and I can find she works in Brussels, and that's in Belgium, and here's her email address, and I can see all of the data I've exported. I can do some simple things. I could do things like just filter and see what I see. But if I have a very large data set, that's not going to be overly productive. It's not going to take me really beyond what's available in the search tool. But let's take the countries, for example. So I just copied a list of all of the countries. I copied them into column A, and then I used the function for remove duplicates to get a list of all of the country codes that were in my data set. And then I went back to my original list and I just counted all the values that match this particular one. So you can see we have a number of different countries, but we have a few countries that only have 1 or 2 users, and we can see that based on both our data and our little chart that we put here. So for Brazil, someone made a typo and they got BT instead of BR, and then there was 2 more users that had it spelled out instead. So if we want to do automated provisioning to give all of the people in Brazil access to something through membership criteria, we're going to need to get those 3 users' data corrected so that the membership criteria will apply. And the same thing here for someone spelled out Germany and someone abbreviated. We were using GB, but then we went to UK, and then, we have an England and we have a USA. So very quickly, I can see which are my problem areas, and then I could go back to my original data source and I could find the particular records and give those back to HR to say, please get these updated so that we can proceed with our project. So that's just one little example. Another example might be this idea that you're going to change the email address format. So you didn't have an identity management platform before, now you do, but people had emails that were based on their nicknames rather than their legal names, and you're going to put a process into place to standardize your naming conventions. And we want to see how many people are going to be affected. So just to make life simpler, I copied a little bit of data into this sheet for you. So the first few columns are just literally off of the identities. The email prefix is just everything before the @ sign. So I used a left formula to be able to find that. And then I said the new format is going to be the first name concatenated with a dot, concatenated with the last name. So I'm calculating what the modified new values will be, and then I can see if the 2 values match or don't match. And obviously, if they don't match, those are the people that I'm concerned about. So for example, in row 6, we can see here that Joseph used to have Joe in his email, but now he's going to get switched back to Joseph. So he's one of the people that the service desk wants to look at. And then we can just use our filtering, and we can see these are the particular people. Now, we also have some anomalies. We could have done a little bit better on this and taken out, say, our admin account or things that did not apply. We could have filtered by department. But it gives us a much smaller working list to be able to go and look at our data. Okay, so those are just 2 ideas that we can use to be able to do data cleanup, to do data documentation, to be able to present a change like this email change to our stakeholders in a meaningful way. Okay, so we're going to switch back now and look at the next use case. So if you'll switch back to the PowerPoint, please. Oh, I got to click. There we go. Okay, so the next one is about role mining. So inside of Identity Security Cloud, we do have tools to identify the roles that might be in common for a group of users. These processes initially tend to work best when we're working with roles for large groups of users who already have some kind of more standardized access. So we can find everything that is common as a birthright role for everyone in the company. That works pretty well. But when we want to look at roles for teams that are smaller, or their current access is very inconsistent, what we get inside the tenant is often roles with few, if any, entitlements. And they don't give us a good way to get visibility into the cross-role analysis. What is the difference between a product manager and a product owner? Do those two types of positions need the same access or different access? So what is it that's possible for us to do? We can export some of that data that the role insights will give us, but we may need to take that into a platform that gives us some more advanced data analysis tools. We could also have audit requirements as we're implementing a new process like this, that we document the reviews, that they're done by the managers, by the application owners, and they're filed away for the next upcoming audit. So this process would also give us those types of artifacts. So what we're going to do here is, instead of taking our PowerShell extract and taking it to Excel, we're going to take it to Power BI. And you saw earlier in Yannick's presentation, we can collect our we can connect our Power BI directly to our tenant through scripting, or in this case, I'm just going to upload to be able to use the tool. So let's take a look at what we've done here. So I'm going to switch back to the, this is the Power BI desktop, and I've imported a data set that is called Identity Access, and the Identity Access has all of those fields that you've seen from the various search queries that we were doing. And then we want to build this particular interactive report. So what we are going to do, I'll show you how this was built, is we're going to use the matrix function, and you basically just drag the matrix onto your screen, and what will come up is you'll be able to say what the rows are and what the values that you want are. So in this case, the rows are all of the source entitlements, and the value, I want to use the number of users that have, from this selection, that have that particular entitlement. So I needed a place to count. So I have this variable that didn't exist in Identity Now called source entitlement count. And I'm going to bring that up for you. So the source entitlement count, there you go, is it can use its M language and be able to count all the rows from our identity access table that are in the source entitlement column where the value equals the selected value of the row. So we could see there's one person that has the track WS reject entitlement versus 67 that have the input entitlement. So I was able to create a formula here and then use that as my value that I was going to display. Now, when we start this, I have a very small set. I've got about 300 users in this tenant, and they do have quite a few entitlements, but I want to learn more about the data and what types of users have what type of access. So one of the things I might want to do is be able to look for all of the users that work for a particular manager. So the way to do that is to get a slicer And same thing, you grab it from your panel and you drag it over onto your report screen. And what we can do, if I click on that, is I can say which field it is, and then I have some options here that I can go in and say that I want it to be a drop down. I don't want to see all the managers in the company all at once. So I was able to come up and put slicers on to say, I want to see by manager, or I want to see by job title, or I want to see by department, or I want to see by location. So I can filter this particular report based on any of those values. And then I also wanted to give the user a sense of the data. How many people have a particular entitlement within their selection? So I created another calculation. This one is a DAX metric, and that one, the unique user count, is calculate the distinct count of identity access for employee number based on this filter. So in this particular instance, I have 302, and I'll show you, watch, it'll change. And then a lot of times when we're doing creating RBAC roles, what we're looking for is a threshold. We want to make sure that most of the users have this particular access or should have this access. So we look for this kind of a commonality. How many users should have this before we consider it? And I just used a metric here of 70%. So I'm just taking the 302, I have another variable, and I'm just displaying it here to give the user a better sense of what I'm doing. Now, let me show you what that's going to look like once I deploy it. All right, so here's the same report that we were building in the desktop. We've just deployed it that we could share it with our IAM team, or I recently worked with a company doing RBAC design, and they were a very data-driven company, and they actually wanted to do this for themselves. So I would have just given access to their team to be able to do this. So you can see I've got my 302 users here. But if I go in and I click the drop down, you'll see it's thinking here of what my values are. Hopefully it'll think faster. Apparently not fast enough. Let's refresh really quickly. See if that helps. Maybe that was a bad idea. It says loading. Okay, that one looks like it's going to be stuck, but let me show you another one. I pulled up a second one for you. So there we go. And now we can see the different people who have managers. And I can pick one of these managers. I pick Amanda Ross. And we can see now that there are 5 people that report to Amanda Ross, and she's really looking to see things that are really 3 or better, or if it's less than that, she really needs to understand why she might include those in her particular role. Maybe it's somebody has a special job, maybe it's something that got carried over that really should not exist and should get removed. And if you watch, I'm going to pick a different manager. Oh, of course, Bob has... There we go. Douglas only has 4. So you see, I can show them the count of the records that they are getting back. And then we can also do things to filter this differently. We could, instead of manager, we could look for everyone with a particular job title. There we go. So there's 8 people that have the accounts payable analyst. And I'm able to look at the data in the context that I'm setting here with my various slicers. So this is one way to look at it. Based on those slicers, what data, what entitlements do each of those teams have? Now, one other way that we might want to look at it, and I basically set up the same type of thing, is sometimes we want to look at it and see who are the individuals that have this particular access and compare what is the difference. So, for example, I had the accounts payable analyst on the first tab, and we can see there were 8 people that have the accounts payable group. But then we get down to the accounting general, and only 7 of the 8 have that entitlement. Well, we know that's very important for our team, so we want to learn more about it. So what we can do is we can make a different view, and this time my values, instead of being the counts, were the individual users and the individual users' access. So I can look at this data and see that for each particular one, we were looking at the accounting general. Nicole does not have that particular access. And then we can figure out, should she have that access, or is there some reason that she doesn't? But a lot of times we need to look and see what the anomalies are to be able to make the appropriate decision. So what we're using again is just our data that we've exported, and we are using the reports from Power BI to be able to build some visualizations that will help us be able to walk through this data, interactively manipulating and seeing the results. These are very simple. I don't claim to be a Power BI expert by far. We have much smarter data science people that we work with, but it gives you an idea of what could be done with your data and how you could use it to your advantage. And again, with the processes that Yannick showed you earlier, this could be totally up to date. So that was the role mining. So we're going to switch back again to the PowerPoint, and we're going to talk about the third use case. So the third use case is really trying to go beyond our very technical IAM focused activities, the things that we have to set up, we have to manipulate, we have to clean up, and think about how identity can affect the overall organization. It's something a lot of organizations strive to get to, but they struggle to be able to see how their identity platform is playing into solving their business problems. So we want to really think about what are the processes we should be focused on optimizing, and what key performance indicators could we use to demonstrate that we are being successful. Leadership is always interested in how they're benefiting from the investment they've made in identity management. They've done it because of cybersecurity, but it can also be a tremendous enabler. They'll come to us and they'll ask us questions. Well, how long does it take to create an account? Or why does it take so long to create an account? Or how many password resets were done last month? We can pull some of that data out, but it's often very isolated and it's out of context. The dashboards in Identity Security Cloud will give us bits of our data, but it's really hard to have that bigger picture view from the business perspective. So what we want to see is, can we pull the data using these metrics and be able to use it to benefit the overall organization? So I've I've given you this big use case. Management doesn't like the onboarding problem. They feel the real costs are too high. There's too much turnover. People are leaving. And we have all kinds of problems that are HR problems, training problems, IT problems. But management wants this fixed. Don't try to read all this. What I want you to get out of it is this is complicated. But it's not a problem that any identity management program can solve by itself, because it really is dependent on HR, dependent on training, dependent, in my scenario, on payroll. We need to have a way that we can track our progress on solving this problem in a common view. So we don't have a way to pull their data beside our data. But what we can do is we can come up with our plan. So I've given you some little examples here. The HR director is going to reduce the time to complete I-9 processing. They're going to monitor termination dates. They're going to create an exit survey and monitor the results. The payroll director is going to look at the number of locked accounts in the payroll system. The training director is going to look for the number of days missed during the first month. They're also going to do some surveys as those trainees become employees and come on board with us. And then from an IAM perspective, we're going to improve our technical implementation for creating employee accounts. And we're also going to use some data from our identity platform to be able to monitor how effective that we're being. So when management comes, they don't want to go to all four of these directors and say, how's it going? What do we want to do? So what we want to do is create a dashboard that's going to show them that bigger perspective. So we're going to flip back really quickly, and I'm just going to show you the concept here. I've created a dashboard, and I've color-coded this dashboard just so that you could get an idea. We could pull in results from our survey system to be able to track the trending scores on the trainee satisfaction reports at various points in time. We could also look at that terminating user satisfaction, and we could set goals for those and watch them as they trend. We could look at the number of locked payroll accounts. We could look at the people who have not logged into payroll here in the yellow. We could look at some metrics about how long it takes to create those accounts. So one from the HR side was the I-9 completion time, and from the IAM side, the time from when a user account is visible in the HR platform until we have it fully provisioned, which is always something we're striving to reduce. And then from the time that we have it created until the user actually activates it, what is the time delay? Now, one of the things you can see on this screen to just give you this idea is I've color-coded these in different colors. So the blue color are the things that are the responsibility of the training director. The purple color are the things that are coming from HR. The yellow are the things that are coming from payroll, and the pink are the things that are coming from the IAM. Now, obviously, we don't necessarily want to color code these like this for our organization, but we can use the BI platform to pull that identity data together with results from other systems and create this single view of solving this business problem and making our IAM platform more valuable to our organization. The leadership only has to go here. They don't have to go tracking down people before the status meeting, and everything is consolidated. That's going to help our program show its value and be more effective to the organization. So those were kind of the use cases that we were going to look at. The simple one on just doing some data hygiene, data cleanup, some documentation. I had another example of a lot of times when we're doing a new implementation, auditors want us to prove that what we have in the new platform matches the quality of what they were getting in their controls from the previous platform. So we could use those same techniques to be able to document that they are same and same. And unfortunately, Excel is still a format that a lot of our auditing colleagues tend to gravitate towards. So I've kind of shown you 3 examples. Now I'm going to give you just some ideas and recommendations that you can take back and improve your overall data analytics. So the first thing to do when implementing any analytics process is learn about your data. There's no one that's going to be able to say what the attributes are, how they've been configured in your company from an external point of view. You're going to have to learn that by talking with your colleagues, your HR colleagues, your business platform colleagues, and learn about what those different data metrics mean. And then learn how you can access that data. Learn about the APIs, learn about the SDKs. Just because you can't see it readily in the interface doesn't mean it's not available. There's a tremendous amount of data that we can get access to. And if you heard the sessions earlier today on the future of reporting, SailPoint is continuing to improve and refine this to get more access to that data. So these are just tools that will help us along that journey. Understand what the quality of your data is as you're starting the process. Can you use certifications to validate that what you're seeing is accurate and meaningful? Share that data with your stakeholders and ask for their feedback. Engage with them if there are mass cleanup activities that are needed. There's old entitlements that haven't been used for 5 years. Let's get those out of the system so that we can focus on the appropriate access for today. Also think about how you can develop standards for managing your data consistently so you don't have to clean up this same data again and again. There could be new areas that you're going to need to look at as you bring new sources onto the system. You have new certification requirements, but we want to make sure that we don't drift backwards in the data we've already cleaned up. So I'm going to leave you with one more reference to help you get started with improving your data if you're on the initial start of your Identity Security Cloud journey. I've given you a link to 2 seminars that were resolving the clean data conundrum in identity security. There are actually 3 videos. 1 and 3 are the ones that are most pertinent to this discussion. And think about how you could use the techniques we talked about with Excel or Power BI to do the data cleanup that is being referenced in this workshop series. Now, some final best practices to leave you with. Pick tools that meet your objectives and use them consistently. You might do a few POCs to figure out, do you like Power BI? Do you like Tableau? What do we have in-house expertise at? But once you get started, you'll be able to capitalize on your work and your input that you've done if you try to pick a platform and stick with it. Again, I focused on PowerShell for this presentation, and you've seen a lot of PowerShell throughout developer days, but if that doesn't fit your organization, these same processes, same ideas will work with other tool sets. It's always a good idea as you're starting to have objectives for what you're going to try to accomplish. If you are going to try to make decisions based on your data, you don't really need all the data in the world. You just need the right data. And that really comes from setting your objectives before you start. As you're starting your projects, if you don't have this kind of expertise within your team, a lot of IAM teams today are pretty small and they're pretty busy. Find who the data gurus are in your organization. Ask questions, share samples, buy a pizza. They may not understand your identity problem or your identity data, but they can help you learn to use the tools more effectively. Be agile, don't take it all on at once. Take your objectives, break them down into things that you can accomplish today. I don't need, when I'm starting, to look at every single piece of data and make sure that every single attribute is perfect. But if I'm going to do membership criteria, I need to look at the values that we're going to use for those criteria. So I'm going to start there, and then we'll work a way into the larger data set. And then make sure that all your work is being presented and that people really understand the value that you're bringing to your organization from your IAM platform. All right. So that was really what I had for you for today. We did get through it a little bit more quickly. So I hope you got some ideas. I hope that there was some tech about how to iterate through those searches regardless of your source. We'll post those for you online. But I hope in general I gave you some ideas of how you might be able to use this in the future. We do have a little bit of a break before the next session that will start in about 8 minutes. So be sure you're back for that. Thank you.